The Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the most enduring and complex struggles in modern history. For over a century, this small stretch of land in the Middle East has been a battlefield for intense wars, revolts, and political tensions that continue to remain a big problem. But why has this conflict persisted for so long? What fuels the endless cycle of violence between Israel and Palestine? Today, we'll explore the historical roots, the pivotal wars, and the ongoing struggle that defines this conflict. Let's begin by going back in time to understand the origins of this conflict, a story that starts early in the 20th century. The roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict can be traced back to the early 20th century, a period of rising nationalism and territorial ambitions. The late 1800s saw the birth of Zionism, a movement advocating for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, a region then under the Ottoman Empire's control. As Jewish immigration increased, so did tensions with the Arab population, who viewed these new settlers as a threat to their land and way of life. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration, a statement by the British government, supported the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This was seen by Jews as a step towards statehood, but for the Arabs, it was a betrayal of promises made to them during World War I, where they were encouraged to revolt against the Ottomans in exchange for independence. As Britain took control of Palestine under the League of Nations mandate, Jewish-Arab tensions escalated. By the 1930s, violent clashes became more frequent, setting the stage for a conflict that would soon engulf the entire region. The Arab Revolt of 1936 to 1939, a national uprising against British rule and Jewish immigration, marked one of the first large-scale conflicts in the region. It ended in severe repression by the British, but left deep scars, further dividing the Jewish and Arab communities. World War II brought about dramatic changes. In the aftermath of the Holocaust, global sympathy for the Jewish people intensified, accelerating calls for a Jewish state. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a plan to partition Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem as an international city. The Jews accepted the plan, but the Arab states and Palestinian leaders rejected it. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The very next day, neighboring Arab countries, including Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, invaded Israel, marking the start of the First Arab-Israeli War. This war saw fierce battles in cities like Jerusalem, Haifa, and Jaffa, resulting in a devastating human toll on both sides. Despite the overwhelming odds, Israel managed to secure victory by early 1949. The armistice agreements that followed left Israel with more territory than initially proposed by the UN, while hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced, leading to a refugee crisis that remains unresolved to this day. This event, known as Nakba, or catastrophe among Palestinians, saw the creation of a large and enduring refugee population whose descendants still live in camps across the Middle East. The end of this war solidified Israel's existence, but also set the stage for future conflicts. The neighboring Arab states, humiliated by their defeat, were unwilling to recognize the State of Israel, and Palestinian grievances over land and sovereignty were far from addressed. Fast forward to 1967. By now, the animosity between Israel and its Arab neighbors had only deepened. On June 5, 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, igniting what would become known as the Six-Day War. The results were swift and shocking. Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. This war fundamentally altered the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. For Israel, it was a resounding military victory that solidified its existence, but for the Palestinians and Arab nations, it was a devastating defeat, deepening the cycle of resentment and violence. The occupation of these territories, particularly the West Bank and Gaza Strip, would become a major point of contention in the years to come, fueling further conflicts and uprisings. The immediate aftermath of the Six-Day War saw Israel establishing settlements in the occupied territories, a move that was condemned by the international community but supported by successive Israeli governments. These settlements, considered illegal under international law, have been a flashpoint of violence and a major obstacle in peace negotiations. The 1967 war also shifted the control of Jerusalem, a city sacred to Jews, Muslims and Christians alike, into Israeli hands, further complicating the conflict. The war's legacy continues to influence the political and social dynamics of the region to this day. By the late 1980s, the Palestinian frustration had reached a boiling point, leading to the First Intifada in 1987. This uprising was characterized by widespread civil disobedience, protests and clashes with the Israeli military in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Images of youths throwing stones at tanks became symbols of Palestinian resistance, while the conflict drew international attention to their plight. The First Intifada eventually led to the Oslo Accords in the 1990s, a peace process that offered hope but ultimately failed to resolve key issues like the status of Jerusalem and the right of return for Palestinian refugees. The Oslo process was seen as a significant step towards peace, but its failure led to disillusionment on both sides, Palestinian extremists viewing the accords as a betrayal, escalating their attacks, while Israeli settlement expansion continued, undermining the prospects for a two-state solution. The collapse of these negotiations gave rise to the Second Intifada in 2000, which was far more violent, involving suicide, bombings, military incursions, and significant casualties on both sides. The Second Intifada deepened the divisions, leading to the construction of the Israeli West Bank barrier and further entrenching the cycle of violence and mistrust between Israelis and Palestinians. The Second Intifada also marked a shift in Israeli military strategy, with targeted assassinations and extensive use of military force becoming more common. The violence of the Second Intifada left deep scars on both societies, hardening attitudes and making future peace efforts even more challenging. The 21st century has seen repeated flare-ups in the conflict, particularly in Gaza, where Hamas, the Islamist militant group, took control in 2007. This led to a series of wars between Israel and Hamas in 2008, 2012, 2014 and 2021, each resulting in widespread destruction and loss of life. Despite international efforts at ceasefires, these conflicts have become a tragic routine in the region. Each of these Gaza wars followed a similar pattern. Rocket fire from Gaza met with overwhelming Israeli military responses. The civilian toll has been staggering, with thousands of lives lost and infrastructure in Gaza repeatedly devastated. These wars have also deepened the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where over 2 million Palestinians live under blockade that severely restricts access to basic necessities. Most recently, on the 7th of October 2023, the conflict escalated once again, when Hamas launched a large-scale rocket assault on Israel, marking the start of a new and intense wave of violence. Hamas's tactics included mass rocket barrages aimed at civilian areas, and reports of cross-border incursions added a new dimension to the conflict. Israel's response has been equally fierce, with extensive bombing campaigns targeting Hamas's infrastructure, but also resulting in significant civilian casualties. Israel also launched extensive ground operations following the Gaza bombings. International reactions have been polarized. While some nations continue to support Israel's right to defend itself, others have condemned the military actions for their impact on civilians. Protests have erupted around the world, with many calling for an end to the violence and a renewed focus on peace talks. The humanitarian situation in Gaza has become increasingly dire, with shortages of food, water, and medical supplies exacerbated by the ongoing blockade and the destruction of critical infrastructure. As the violence rages on, the prospect of a lasting peace seems more distant than ever. The October 2023 conflict has not only intensified the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, but has also reignited debates over the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Some analysts fear that this latest escalation could lead to a broader regional conflict, drawing in neighboring countries and further destabilizing the Middle East. As we've seen, the Israeli-Palestine conflict is a deeply rooted struggle with no easy solutions. From its origins in early 20th century nationalism to the devastating wars and uprisings, and now the ongoing violence, the cycle of conflict has caused unimaginable suffering on both sides. The recent escalation in October 2023 greatly lowered any hopes of peace in the region. However, achieving peace will require not just political agreements, but a profound shift in the hearts and minds of the people involved, a shift towards mutual recognition, respect, and a willingness to coexist. Everything's possible, and there's always a way. We just need to find it. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, stay aware. Until next time.